Hello and welcome to Audionautic Deep Space Network episode 123. This is the Independent Musician's Guide to Production and Promotion. And today things might look a little bit different because we have a special guest with us, Ryan from Sketch Audio. And all of us are musicians. We're a niche podcast, but we use a lot of effects, right? But today we're actually going to go in depth with a plugin developer, Ryan, to discuss how these are created and what goes into making emulations of our favorite gear. And then we're also going to discuss everything new and our thoughts on the MPC3 update. And Eon Lake has an MPC, but I don't know his thoughts on it. So we'll hear what he thinks. It's not out yet. It's going to be in beta, but I'm curious because he's not one to use that MPC very often. But yeah, so with me today is Eon Lake. How are you, my friend?
Hello, I'm very good. Thank you.
Yeah.
I think I got caught a little bit of your bad throat and coughing business.
Oh, man. You don't need that, man. I don't know how it traveled across continents, but you do not need that.
You know, maybe it's just a sympathy thing, you know, because
we're in solidarity. You're in solidarity. I am of it, or remnant. So I'll be riding the mute a little bit, but you know, I'm sure you will be too, Eon Lake. But what you been up to, man?
What have I been up to? I've been enjoying the somewhat late to the party English summer here, which is it's been all the usual things, incredibly humid and kind of hard to do stuff, but it makes me happy anyway when I get up in the morning and it's actually sunny and warm. And yeah, I just counting down the days to having a holiday.
Yeah, that'll be good. Yeah, you're going off for a week or two, right?
That's right. Yeah, I don't expect to miss any more than a week of this, though, because you know the world may keep turning, but you know this show has to go on. You know
it's your outlet for talking about nerdy things like compression thresholds and whatever we were talking about with the 303 emulation with Ryan before we went live.
Yeah, exactly. Got to get my fix.
We're very happy to have you with us today. Curtis unfortunately can't join us. He has to deal with a couple things, but that's okay. We've got Ryan here, and Ryan, you could probably describe yourself better, but app developer, plugin developer with Sketch Audio. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. Thank you guys so much for having me on the channel. I do always enjoy the opportunity to nerd out about gear and music technology. And I'm excited to, talk about these new plugins that I have. So yeah, just thanks for having me on.
No, thanks for coming on. And I know you hit me up on Instagram, another Instagram win, because that's how Curtis and I actually met through Instagram.
Okay, right on.
5 years ago.
That's why we're here.
Yeah, that's why we're here. And even though I'm not the biggest fan of Instagram anymore with the algorithm and stuff, it still works in some good ways like this. But you hit me up. You sent me a couple of those plugins. And I've really been vibing with Dr. Vibe, but I'm checking out the other ones too. But I was hoping to get a couple of videos up to share some of the sounds, but it just didn't work in that way. But I'll have some stuff on my channel soon. But yeah, let's just get right into it. So Sketch Audio, what inspired you to start it? And what was the journey like going from the idea phase, to launching the first product?
Wow. Yeah. So I guess it depends on how far back you want to go.
How far back do you want to go?
I'll just try to give the little history, my history as a developer. I've been developing apps for iOS since 2017 under my own name, Ryan Robinson. And my first app is called AutoPad. And it's actually kind of a utility for like church musicians. So I don't know if you're like familiar with worship music, but harmonically, it's all fairly like straightforward. There's not a lot of dissonance. So what people do is they'll, to kind of fill out the sound in a live setting, you'll just run kind of a drone in the background. And you know, a soft kind of pad sound.
Yeah.
And so in college, I was kind of playing in a lot of like worship bands and stuff. And when I wanted to get in development, that just seemed like a kind of a cool project to do something that would fill that need for people. So my first app is literally like 12 buttons, one for each key, and then you could go choose your sound, and I just, recorded some seamless loops, and you could press a button and it would just be kind of a nice little subtle soundscape that will just play for as long as you want. And that app ended up like doing pretty good. And it was giving me enough like positive feedback to kind of keep at this whole app development thing. And to keep learning. I've always been into music, so I wanted to kind of get into music related apps. So I just kind of kept going down that rabbit hole. And that was back in 2017. And I was actually able to eventually go like full time with app development in 2021.
Wow.
So since then, I've released a few other apps under my own name. I have a drum pad app that I made with a friend. His name is Corey. And we still work together on a lot of stuff. And I also have some MIDI sequencer apps. Because I've got a bunch of synths back here.
I was gonna get at the end what synths you got
when,
back
when
there.
you're playing synths, actually what you want to do is turning the knobs and exploring the sound, right? You don't want to be like playing with your hands.
Yeah.
So I created a couple of generative MIDI sequencers that have done pretty well on the platform.
Dude, Ryan, you're speaking our language with generative MIDI sequencers.
Yeah,
so,
yeah.
Really
so
quickly, I don't mean to interrupt, but are those? What are the names of all of those? Because even
so
a drone
for those ones.
Yeah, because a drone plugin would be really cool too.
The drum pad app is called SDSX, and then the MIDI sequencers. One of them is called Zoa, which is based on the Game of Life. And another one is called Goode, which is kind of a weird step sequencer that I just kind of, anyways, you can do some of those step components on it that are in those Electron boxes. So you can kind of get a little bit more out of like a short sequence than you otherwise would, because you can jump from between steps. Anyways, so those apps were under my own name, but I had always kind of been wanting to get into synths and audio effects, and I wanted a brand that could kind of serve as the vehicle for that. So that I started Sketch Audio last September with some synths. Mm-hmm. I have Blipbox, which is a little drum synth, 16 voice drum synth, and then Phase Monkey, which is a phase distortion synthesizer.
Oh,
and those, they run on iOS and Mac OS. And then I released the effects in June. So that's kind of where I'm at, my history as a developer. Sketch Audio is going to be synths, and it's going to be effects, and it's kind of my creative outlet for that that side of things.
Awesome. Okay, and before we get to Eon Lake's question, I just want to say hello to everybody in the chat. We've got Thomas, one of our patrons. He says, "Oh my God, first like." Yes, feel free to leave a like if you're digging the video, or as the video goes on, if you get some value out of it, it does help the channel. We're actually going to have a giveaway at the end that I'll talk about regarding Sketch Audio. You should definitely check out Dr. Vibe and all the other ones. But man, I can't stop singing the praises of Dr. Vibe as an SB404.
I've not heard him like this.
As an SB404 aficionado. We've also got Little Bro. What's going on, Little Bro? Welcome. And Bendu is also in the chat. Hello to all, he says. Welcome, Bendu. I'll be mastering some of his tracks later, so you'll be getting those soon, Bendu. I think that's everybody. If I missed anybody, there's quite a lot of chat, but if I missed anybody, let me know. Eon, like, you've got a very good question for Ryan. You care to go?
Well, partly answered, I think, so far, but we'll see how it goes. So, I mean, what I wanted to know was how long you've been developing plugins. So maybe you've covered that part already, but I was wondering what influenced your decision to focus on iOS specifically as a platform, and whether or not the portability that you can have with the M chip is something that's useful to either your business or technological plans or roadmap. Is that a useful thing?
Yeah. So for me, part of the reason I focus on iOS, for some it's just historical, is because that first app of mine was an iOS app. And so I've become really comfortable with the tools that are available for developing for that platform. But also, I think the main reason I really like the iPad as a music making device, because for me, it kind of sits nicely in that middle ground between software and hardware.
Mm.
We know how there's this endless debate between software versus hardware, right? And software is great because you can do all these flexible things with it for very little cost, right? You can just change some code, and all of a sudden it does something completely different that would otherwise take a lot of components. But then hardware has that tactile experience, right, that people love. And so I think the iPad is a nice middle ground for that, because you get that experience of like touching a surface and having the sound respond as you do that. So that's one of the reasons that kind of made me interested in the iPad for music making. And then yeah, I have that just kind of also the historical aspect of it. And then to your point about the M chips, it is really, being a developer now, it's been amazing to see the work that Apple's put into making it really easy to develop for all of their platforms. So a lot of their new technologies, you can write your code once and it will run essentially the same on iPad and on the Mac. And so I'm trying to kind of make some inroads now in the desktop market. Although, there are some limitations with this approach. Like, I can't support Windows right now since I'm using a lot of Apple specific technologies.
Yeah.
A lot of people that are developing desktop plugins will use a framework called Juice, which allows you to do plugins for Windows and Mac simultaneously.
Oh, I see. Yeah.
Yeah.
I got a quick question. You mentioned how if you do it once and it kind of works on iPad, on iPhone, on the Mac desktop and stuff, does it scale in terms of size and stuff, or do you have to account for that?
Yeah, getting the window sizes is quite challenging.
Really?
And, it's something that's hard for me from a design perspective, because there's a surprising amount of people that want to use AV3 plugins on their iPhone. And there is just not a lot of real estate on an iPhone, and people could be using it landscape or they could be using it portrait. And to come up with a solution that kind of works from iPhone to Mac, it's not easy, and I don't think I've totally solved it, but it is one of the reasons I've tended towards kind of a minimal design approach with a really simple control. And it gives me that flexibility so that if someone is in portrait on the iPhone, I can switch to a view where you're going through like panels. So you have the vinyl on one page, and then you have the converters on the next, and so on. So there are challenges, but Apple does, they give you the tools to be able to really easily kind of see what's going to happen on the different platforms.
Okay. All right. Well, so go ahead, Ian Lake.
I was just going to say, being a little superficial, I mean, I like the apps themselves and what they do, but I kind of like the design as well. From the app icons themselves to the interfaces, it's nice and clean and uncluttered, and you just get straight on with hearing a result when you change something.
Yeah,
and I think it's definitely, from my point of view, one of the strong points of all of them really that are on the website.
Yeah, I don't want to call them simple. Like, it's not simplicity in a bad way, but it's in a good way. Is that it's very readable. You look at it, and you don't get inundated with like, oh, how do I? It's kind of just like all right there, laid out, which I really like. Some plugins are very, lots of stuff.
Thank you. I appreciate that, and I do. Yeah, there is a little bit of a philosophy behind it. I want people to be able to focus on the sound. So I try to make the controls fairly simple. And, maybe one of my more controversial takes, but is that I think one of the reasons for the magic of hardware is the lack of visual feedback. And I think so when you're working on with a hardware box, you're turning knobs, and your first thing you're focusing on is how the sound responds to that movement. And so I've kind of tried to lean into that, and make the controls simple and go for less visual feedback, actually, so that to try to get people to focus on the sound.
I like that.
Yeah. So I'm just sharing on the screen. This
well.
is Dr. Vibe. So you can see very minimal in a good way with all the settings and stuff, but it's all laid out, presets right there on the left. And then you get 3 of all the like sound things, the vinyl sim, so that's analog to digital, digital to analog converter, right? That you've got in the middle there.
Yeah, except it's all digital.
Well, right. Yeah, of course.
Yeah,
And then the
yeah,
mix
but it's
slammer
that. Yeah.
goes hard.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
the concept for Dr. Vibe is kind of replicating that kind of classic workflow that people would use, where you have your vinyl record player that's the source of your samples, and you run that into some kind of old school digital box. And the box doesn't have, it's got, the converters aren't very good, and who knows what sample rate it's running at. And then you might be clipping it a little bit as you go in, right? And then the final piece is that mix slammer, which is the compressor kind of based on the 303 vinyl sim compressor, which people would do. They would just they would produce their beats, and then they would just run them through that vinyl sim compressor.
Still do
it. Yeah.
Yeah, it's the best way to do it. It's that special sauce. But I'm glad you brought up the 303, because that is actually my next question. I wanted to talk a little bit about the emulation process when you're emulating specific gear, because I know like the 303, there's a preset in there that you made that's like emulating that compressor that everybody loves, that setting and all that. So when it came to like doing that setting, or even the mix slammer, which is, as you're saying right now, kind of the genesis for that idea or the inspiration, how do you go about emulating these things? What are you doing? Are you like measuring the gear, looking at different metrics or something?
Yeah. So there are tools you can use, and I would say there's a couple like sides to that process. There's having the actual DSP that generates the effect, right? And then there's
that's
kind of the
digital
preset
signal processing.
Right? So DSP is the digital signal processing, and then there's the kind of preset design, like once you've kind of created it and exposed all the parameters that you want. So for the beginning, it's I had learned about this 303 effect, and I thought it was something that was really interesting. I thought it sounded awesome, and I thought it was something that I could possibly approach with my skill set. So for example, like doing a component level model of the Prophet 6 filter or whatever would take some math skills that are beyond my current abilities, we'll say. And people that work on that stuff have, like PhDs. But this effect, it seemed like, okay, this is a digital effect. It seems like something I could maybe get close to with where I'm at. So I picked up a box and just started throwing things at it. There's a program called Plugin Doctor, which I think is kind of famous now because Dan Worrell uses it a lot. I don't know if you've seen his channel, but he uses it a lot to kind of see what plugins are doing.
I see.
And so what that allows you to do is not just with plugins, but with hardware, you can run test signals into it, and you can start to kind of probe how does this thing behave. So with the compressor, one of the things you do is you just run a signal that gradually gets louder. And then you're trying to see, okay, like what is the transfer curve, right? And it really is amazing, because when people say that the 303 is such a unique effect that you can't get anywhere else, they're right, because I when I've gone in and looked at this, most compressors, it's like linear until you get to the threshold, and then there's like ratio, right?
Yeah.
But this one is it's just very different. It's not linear. It has a really interesting curve. It does some pulling up on the sound, and it has like multiple stages It's really a unique effect, and it's cool to kind of see those things come out as you run these test signals in.
That's fascinating to me. I mean, this is the main thing I wanted to talk about is because like the compressor, any of the compressors on the 404, and I don't have the 303, but there is that 303 emulation that has a compressor setting, and as you crank that compressor up, because it's only one setting, it's compressor, and you can go up and down, and
it's just amazing. I mean, it's a perfect effect. It's one knob.
Yeah.
And as you crank that knob, it like goes through a couple different phases in terms of how the curve behaves. And I honestly, I spent months kind of obsessing over it.
Yeah.
And there's still some mystery there. So you can't. I would love to meet the person who programmed it. But you can't meet them, and you can't really know what it's doing.
Yeah.
But I am really happy with what we were able to come up with, and I think it's something that gets you in that ballpark really quite well, and it also gives you a lot of flexibility, because that's I love to have that flexibility to be able to mess with the envelope a little bit or kind of change the gain staging really easily. And you also have that there's a little wet control. So you can do parallel compression because it is such a powerful effect that it's easy to overdo it with.
Yes.
Yeah,
theoretically,
I always find I always find that on the 404, like when I just need to glue things together, it's like that's the first thing I go for. Just that compressor, just instantly. I call it the special sauce on the 404 because it's just like as soon as you throw it on, whatever you've got, it just kind of glues together in such an interesting way. And I now that you say it, where it's pulling things up, I like know audibly exactly what you're talking about, because that's kind of that gold, that like audible gold that I hear, where everything just kind of like gets this oomph, but it sits better. It's like almost mixing in a cheat mode because it just kind of glues it all in this way. Like you could even get sidechain out of it just by like having the kick.
Yeah, for sure. And that's one of the things people would do with it is you would push your drums a little bit harder into the compressor and then pull back your accompaniment. And it kind of gives you a little bit of that pumping, that side chain effect that just sounds great.
Yeah.
I apologize. I keep getting dropouts. I don't know if it's affecting the stream itself, but like Ryan and Eon like keep pausing for me. I keep losing you guys.
I did lose you there for a few seconds.
Okay, so
I did too.
Yeah, so I apologize. It's probably something with the internet here because I'm the one having to stream it today. So if there are dropouts, I do apologize, but we'll get through it. This is a lot of really interesting information, and I do appreciate Ryan just going in depth with all this. The podcast version, which will be up on Apple and Spotify, won't have these drops, or at least some of them, because I get it directly from what we're streaming from. So Ryan and Eon Lake may pause a little bit, but the drop should be a little better on that. Sleeping State says had a few drops. Yeah, I do apologize. It's sometimes some days the internet here just kind of gets really wonky, so it is what it is. But Eon Lake, unless there's anything you want to follow up with, or Ryan, if there's anything you want to say more about the 303 emulation and all that, I know Eon Lake's got another question.
I had a little micro question I wanted to
go for it.
That having looked at the way that it behaves, the way that it responds, and seeing how it is a little bit quirky, what's your gut feel? Do you think it was designed like that, or do you think it's a happy accident that it's turned out to be something that
it is funny because the equations that I kind of settled on to generate that characteristic curve, if you will, it is kind of the thing that if you might think it was a mistake if you were looking at it from a perspective that you're trying to make a traditional compressor. So it does make me think that, wow, what was their process? Is this something that they just had kind of put together and they liked the sound of, even though it wasn't, technically a correct thing? Or are they going for something that because if you read the manual for that knob, it says, adjusts the sense of compression that is characteristic of vinyl records. And so, you know, they weren't necessarily going for a standard compressor, I think.
Yeah, from the way they
So
word it.
it's just I think hard to know
Mm.
what it was, but it certainly has turned into, I mean, it's, you know, it's a great sound for sure.
Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely.
And that,
I'm
I mean,
very
that's the fun
curious.
thing about music, right? Is that there is really no rules, and that if there is something that sounds good, you can just go with it,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Absolutely.
On that note, just before Eon, like you ask your question, I'm very curious to see. I might have to check out, what was it, Plugin Doctor, the effect you were talking about that you can see.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is it Plugin Doctor? I really want to see
Plugin Doctor.
the compressor that's on the 404, because the 404 Mark II has 303 sim, which has that compressor as just one knob, but it also has a compressor, which just setting everything to 0 is like it just makes everything sound better. And I'd be curious to see what that's doing in that way as well. So you're inspiring me. I'll have to try to check that out, because
it is fun. And yeah, I mean, you can kind of go down a rabbit hole with it, because you can just, I mean, it has a lot of different visualizations of like the frequency response, of the harmonics that get generated, and you could really go, it's a lot of fun just to see what is happening to the audio.
Yeah. All right, Dion, like, what's your next question, my friend?
Yeah. So the real question, sorry, was what challenges do you face when you're trying to recreate the nuances of real hardware in a digital format, in a modern...
Yeah. Let me just see. You know, it is, I think, first off, it's like, if you're trying to exactly replicate something, you know, that's really hard to do. And so what I try to do is kind of offer my own perspective on it, you know, and offer kind of my take on the thing. So I try to get into that ballpark, and then kind of then say, okay, what do I think is interesting about what's going on here? So, you know, I have to have that kind of idea that I want to convey. And you know, part of that too is, you know, I have limitations, like I mentioned earlier. Some of the stuff that goes into the really advanced effects, the component modeling and stuff, you know, it requires a lot of advanced math, which you know, I'm getting there. You can learn it, but it, you know, some of the stuff, it's like pretty sophisticated math that goes into these things. So it's like also kind of finding out what is achievable for you as at your level. But then, you know, I've also you're kind of knowing what resources are out there. So for Dr. Vibe, for example, there's a needle effect on the vinyl sim, which is kind of modeling the geometric distortions that happen between the cutting needle that cuts the vinyl and the playback needle. They're actually different shapes. So the played back signal, there is distortion in it. And, you know, there was a huge effort to minimize that distortion. But there are academic papers about that, and also about replicating that distortion. So I was able to go and like read those papers, and eventually kind of package that into what that needle slider is, right? So being able to kind of read through those things and think about, okay, how can I put this into code? That's taken some development of my skills, and that was a fun one. And then like for the converters, for example, there's a different anti-aliasing filters that you can choose. So that involves going and looking at like the technicians manuals. You can find the technicians manuals for, say, the Akai S950, and you can see the circuit layout. And you know, I'm not an electrical engineer, but you can go and see like what the components are, and like what converter chip they were using, and what filters did that use, right? And you know, and then you can start to say, okay, well, how can I do that with code? And so it's a lot of digging, but it is amazing because the resources are out there, and I don't know how I would do it without, the internet. It's an amazing amount of information, academic papers, technical papers that you can look at and then, bring it into code.
Really ironic that a lot of those papers are focused around, the identification and the elimination of the components that you're trying to model.
Well, he's reverse engineering.
Yeah, because they would develop a model of the distortion so they could eliminate it.
Yeah.
I'll just take the model.
Ryan, that's so fascinating to me that, this is what I wanted to talk with you about, is the detail, like how you're going into the detail of getting into this. So you're looking up research papers, you're looking up and then reverse engineer, they're trying to undo it. And you're like, well, I want to do that. So how do I do that? And then how do I apply that into code, right? To turn it into, a digital thing. This is just like fascinating to me. Like, and I never would have thought like, oh, look at these. I don't do development and stuff, but like, look at these research papers and you can find all that stuff there. So it's just really interesting. You're doing this research.
Thank you. It is for me. It's a lot of fun. I've thought that it's a little bit like, I like being an archaeologist, where you're kind of going around and you're digging through stuff and you're trying to find something that's like a little bit interesting that you can kind of dust off and polish off and then like show it to people. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so that's definitely fun. I do think though, you being a developer, you do spend a lot of time just in kind of really boring details that, so it's not for everyone. But for my temperament, it's very rewarding. Yeah.
All right, Ryan, what is next for Sketch Audio? What's the future?
Oh man. Well, I think I mentioned earlier, we are wanting to kind of expand our support on desktop. I want to be kind of a first class member of the plugin ecosystem on Mac OS. So I currently actually have a clap wrapper. You guys familiar with the clap format?
No.
Seen it on the
website. I'll talk. It's a newer plugin format, but the main thing is actually that I have a VST format as well. So that's kind of the missing piece, is that this new AUV3 format it's not on a lot of DAWs on Mac OS yet. Like, you can use it in Ableton, you can use it in Logic, you can use it in Reaper. And actually, I've tested it. It's not official, but they do work in FL Studio.
Curtis would be smiling right now.
Yeah, so they have not actually officially said that they support this new audio unit format, but I've loaded the plugins up and like they work. So they do work in FL. But to really kind of complete the picture, I have a VST wrapper that's coming, a VST format. And then I think one thing I want to do, just to get the plugins out to more people, I think eventually I'll implement some kind of free trial. Because right now it's a one-time purchase. The synths are right now $10 and the effects are $15. And we have some bundles, but I think I'm going to try to switch to a free trial just so people can, try it out for free.
Yeah.
And then, I'm always working on new stuff. I have a list here. I have probably like 10 effects ideas, just like waiting to be done. And I have a few synth ideas as well. One of the nice things for me about developing is that it's actually the creative side is not the hang up in terms of getting things done, just because the execution of making a plugin just takes so long. So I can always just kind of, if I have an idea, I can just jot it down. And then, I have no shortage of those. So there'll be new stuff as well.
How long would you say a plugin takes typically, or an effect? Effects, synth, whatever have you?
It's interesting. For Sketch Audio, I did build a lot of the kind of the infrastructure code myself. And so that took some extra time. But now I have it. So I was actually looking back. I think I started building the synths in like December, and they were released in September, 9 months later. And
Okay.
for the effects, it was maybe a little shorter. I started building them 7 or 8 months earlier. But I have, I have other, I have to kind of maintain my other apps as well.
Yeah.
But it's something that takes on the order of months, I would say, just in terms of the building process. And then kind of whatever research is happening as well. The research for Dr. Vibe did that added a bit onto the process, just kind of getting to know what all the different components of that effect.
More quirky and a bit more layered, I guess, that one.
Yeah.
Yeah. Dr. Vibe definitely has the most going on under the hood there.
Yeah. Okay, we got a good question from Sleeping State, and I know you had mentioned you actually kind of wanted to ask something to this effect, Ryan, on the show. They asked, does Sketch Audio take requests for future projects like a suggestion box?
Oh, yeah. Well, I don't. You can always just send me a support email, and I'm very happy to read those emails and
let me get
either
your website.
Respond to people's feedback or new ideas people may have. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, perfect.
And that was actually one of my questions. I wanted to ask you guys a question.
Yeah.
Which was, what kind of creative synth and audio effects plugins would you like to see?
And my response is, how much time you got? No, I'm just kidding. I got 2, and I know I mentioned them to you, and we talked about it earlier. But I'm gonna say it live so it's solidified on the interwebs.
The rest of us.
I would love to see. We talked the SP303, but the SP202 is known and loved and still purchased and restored and all that for its pitch artifacting, especially when you drop the pitch. I would love to see something like that, emulating something like that. I'm not saying you need to go out and buy an SP202, but I'm just saying I would love to see an effect like that, because there probably are some, but given Dr. Vibe, I think you could really make something special with that. Because I mean, it's like, it's a well-loved effect that pitch drop that it does. And I mean, like, you cannot get close with a lot of even the 404. It doesn't get close when you drop the pitch. The play rate pitch drop is a little closer, which we've been messing with a bit and talking about. And then the other thing, there's a lot of them and stuff, but I would love to see something like a very long drone type reverb, like Supermassive, Valhalla Supermassive on iOS.
Yeah. I've definitely, I've been playing around with some reverb stuff, and so I'm kind of laying the groundwork. I want to get into delay and reverb effects, but I haven't got that kind of crystallized like idea of where to go yet.
Yeah, because
it's certainly something that's on my radar.
I feel like when it comes to the SP, which I use a lot with iOS to kind of like complement, supplement, all that type of stuff, the SP reverbs are so weak for like drone type things, like so weak. And someone in my latest live stream mentioned that there's an effect called Hadu or Hadao or something, and it's a modulated reverb, but if you lower the time to 0, it's actually a pretty long reverb, but it's still nothing close like a drone type reverb. And I'd love to see something like that.
What's that one called?
It's an effect in the SP404 called it's HA-D, I think AU or something. But but the one I like, the one we talk about all the time on the show, that's a actual plugin and it's free from Valhalla, is Supermassive. It's just not on iOS to my knowledge, but that thing has all these like really long drone types with warping delays, and like you can pitch warp and things like that. But Ian, like, what about you? What's something you'd like to see?
So for me, from an iOS point of view, it's pretty staggering the quality of stuff you can get on the platform. I mean, I've been blown away by a few of the apps that I've got. I'm definitely getting different tones from anything that's on there. But the problem I always find is just dirtying them up, which is my the good doctor skill.
Yeah, the good doctor.
There you go. It'll get you there.
But it's all the things of that nature where you want to scrape the edges off a little bit, So dirty compressors and things that add noise. tape effects, you know,
Yeah.
like the ones that emulate Mellotron, you know, magnetic tape and so on,
Yeah.
or you know, a knackered reel to reel and stuff like that, just so that you can create something that sounds a little more organic on those
Yeah.
platforms. Those are the struggles that I tend to have, is just dirtying things up a bit.
Dude, you would
Yeah.
love the Good Doctor.
Yeah.
That
It's
analog
So-
to
must
digital
have
is
for
like
that
exactly
reason.
what you need.
Yeah. Yeah, because I do. There's kind of a hardware inspired soft clipping curve in there, so you'll get some coloration on pretty much anything that goes through those converters. But I guess it just puts a question in my mind. Yeah, just thinking about what I mean. iOS is such a cool platform, and going back to earlier, one of the reasons I like it is because there is a lot of kind of creative developers on there. So like what is the stuff that you guys have really enjoyed on iOS besides, of course, the new Sketch Audio Effects plugins?
Well,
What
I
are
was
some
gonna say
apps that jump to your mind that you really love?
Paul
I
Stretch.
like, yeah, pull stretch.
It's
I
free.
like the
Yeah.
Moog stuff. I hate to say it, but I mean, I do like the fatness of some of the modeled analog synths. But there are also a few other ones. There's one called Synthesizer, which is really, from a sequencing point of view, it's like a big grid sequencer. You can have 32 or 72 steps or something, and you just draw dots in 4 octaves, and you get sound. I think things that redesign the way that you interact with composition are definitely are things that I'm interested in. So that one I've used a hell of a lot. Lastly, on a remix for Sunwarper, by the way.
Yeah.
But
Ryan, I should connect you or try to connect you with Alex from We Name You Apps. There's a small creator that makes some really wonky, weird, in a good way, plugins. We've covered quite a few on this channel. Sinusidu, which is like a sine wave plugin, and then there's Soundfrews, which is it's like this looper. You can send signal in and do all this crazy manipulation to it and stuff. They're making some really cool, weird, trippy plugins. I would definitely. I don't know if you're familiar with them, but
I'm familiar with them, though I haven't personally tried any of their stuff yet.
Yeah, they sent me quite a few things, and we've covered them on the channel. But they make some really cool stuff, and he's always making some really trippy stuff. And then there was another one that was in my head. Koala. I mean, Koala as an iOS app is just the GOAT.
So Koala for me was the first thing that I could use to start dirtying stuff up and make the kind of sounds that I wanted to.
Bit cooker.
Yeah, and it's been amazing to see how Koala has really kind of achieved success, like in the mainstream. Just kind of, like there's a 404 update where they added Koala integration, which
the new update,
pretty cool.
Dude, that integration is crazy. We've gone into lengths on it, and man, like the way it works, you turn Koala into hardware. Like you're talking, we always talk the same. Like you have been this episode, the tactile nature of hardware. Being able to twist the knob and it responds, and now you can do it with Koala with these effects and stuff. It's really cool. Koala, especially like the effects they've added too when they made the bus effects. And all of the effects, like they made the effects, to my knowledge, like it's internal. And having like Bit Cooker, which is kind of similar to Dr. Vibe, but way less nuanced and stuff. But it's like it's sample rate drop and things like that. And then they added a wobble effect, so it's 2 separate effects, but it can kind of get there. But it's crazy.
An honorable mention for me would have to be Mutant by Maze Tools. It's a weird grid thing, and you sequence multiple layers, and it's got some crazy sounds in it that have may or may not have ended up on albums of mine.
I think that, I mean, and I think for me, that's one of the fun things about iOS is just kind of the creative plugins that are available. Sometimes I feel like the desktop plugin market is too serious, serious. Everyone's trying to do a marginally better emulation of 1176 or something.
Effect compressor.
I'm curious, do you think part of that is the fact that desktop pricing is higher typically for like a plugin? Am I muted? Or you hear me?
Sorry, is that me or?
Yeah, either way. But Ryan, since you're a developer, I'm curious to hear from you first. But because like a compressor, if you go and buy a compressor on a like a big, not big plugin, but a plugin that's like a desktop, it's like $50-$100 or something. Whereas a compressor or something, like Dr. Vibe is what, 15? So I'm curious, do you think people are willing to be a little more experimental with these plugins because they can justify, or consumers can justify the cost a little better?
Yeah, I mean, it's something I'm still trying to figure out, is bridging that gap between the iOS and the Mac and the desktop market. And I do like having things priced a little lower, just so that more people can try them out and play with them. And yeah, I think it does contribute to the sort of creative nature of the platform. It is more of a kind of, developers will kind of just try something out and just, and one thing that's really nice is there's a forum, there's an Audio Bus forum. There's some very enthusiastic people on there. And, for me, I started out with no reputation, but people will try out what you're doing. And so I think it's just they're just willing, the users on iOS also are just really willing to try things out, which I think contributes to that. It makes developers want to offer creative things.
Do you think it attracts a different type of developer as well? Just there's something about mobile platforms or iOS in particular that just draws a different crowd.
It's possible. I think also one of the challenges is of course, if you're on iOS, you have to pay the Apple tax. And I think a lot of the desktop players are not interested in doing that. And so what you're seeing, for example, is like FabFilter. You can get the FabFilter plugins for iOS, but it's a separate purchase, which, coming from their perspective, I think it makes a lot of sense. But I do think, what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to offer things as one purchase. So when you buy it, you can use it, on all of your Apple devices. So yeah. But I have to educate people. I have to say, yeah, you can actually use this on your Mac. And people are like, oh,
almost tell.
So I have to do some education on my part.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, Ryan, I appreciate you coming on. You're going to stay on, I know, for our coverage of the MPC and all that, but it means a ton to have you on and talk about these things. I know Little Bro was saying one of those times where I understand nothing. I know this is pretty nerdy talk, but that's the point of the show. We get into the nitty gritty with, getting in. We try to keep it, as explain like I'm 5 or whatever as we can, but this is kind of this is obviously a bit more of an in-depth, detailed thing. And I wanted to approach it, and hopefully we did, from, musicians, at least. I don't want to speak for everybody, but for me, I use all these effects and don't really think about typically what goes into all this research and time and how did they make this sound so cool, right? Like I throw on a plugin and I'm just like, oh, okay, this is so cool. But like a lot of nuance, a lot of time, a lot of research, a lot of sweat, energy went into this, right? And so it's really interesting to hear it from that side.
For sure, yeah.
I really wanted to know these things.
And if I'm doing it right, I can dig in to those details for people, and then people can come away with something that just sounds good, and they can flip through those presets and be like, oh, that's cool, right? And so that's the goal, right? Is that I'm offering that. I do the nerdy stuff, so you don't have to.
There you go. Well, we appreciate your sacrifice. So with that, though, Ryan is kind enough to give 3 codes. So the first 3 comments on the video, once the stream ends, it has to be once the stream ends. I don't think you can comment before, but comment which of the you're doing. It's those 3 plugins, right? Dr. Vibe, Hyperboost, and what's the third one?
Scissorhands.
So whichever of those 3 you would like, put it in the comment, and then we'll talk. We'll DM.
And I'll throw you, if people want the synths too, they could.
Okay.
Lipbox is a drum synth. Phase Monkey is a phase distortion synth. Scissorhands is a filter with some extras, and then Hyperboost is a clipper with a EQ, simple EQ in there.
Me personally, I'm gonna recommend Dr. Vibe, And I think everybody would benefit from having that in their workflow, but they're all really awesome. So the thing is, one code per person. Again, the first 3 comments to post after the video ends. It's got to be after the video ends, but just comment. Would love if you'd comment, you know, something you got out of the video or something like that, but also put the I'm blanking on the word, but the effect that you would like, or the synth that you would like. Smiling Air says no iOS. It is on Mac if you have Mac though. And lastly, I just want to say, I mentioned compression, right? For, you know, purchasing plugins and things. And Thomas said all compressors are pretty much the same, just different GUI. I don't know if I agree with that, considering what we just talked about with the 303.
I mean, that's the thing about it, because in theory they are, and then you put something through different ones, and you're faced with this undeniable difference. It's crazy, isn't it? I mean,
yeah,
in theory they're doing the same thing, but man,
yeah.
Well, let's ask a developer.
I mean, at the core,
Ryan.
it's just moving a volume fader, right? That's what compression is, just automating, you know.
Yeah.
But the side effects that come from how quickly you move that fader, or the kind of curve you apply when you go from one level to the next, it's
how you do it.
imparts a lot into the sound. And you know, so, and I, you know, the 303 one is interesting because it does have a really different curve from most, you know, kind of normal compressors, if you will.
Yeah,
it might not even be properly termed a compressor. Like I called it the mix slammer.
Yeah, audible gold.
And
that's what it's called.
the even on the original effect, it's CMP is the name of the knob, and the description is it adjusts the sense of compression. So, you know, it's anyways, that's a little bit of a tangent.
No, I love hearing. I mean, this is why we're here, and we'll get into that in a minute when we talk about the Patreon.
We're here to nerd out.
Yeah, we're here to nerd out. And Thomas also says, my point is 99% of users can't hear. The difference is basically just an automated volume control. I mean, I find you can add some color with compressors to a degree, depending. And I mean, sidechain compression is something that, you know, I'm not saying you need I use the stock Logic compressor for most compression, besides when I use what's on the SP or what I'm doing in like Dr. Vibe. But when it comes to like a mastering compressor, I'm just using the stock compressor. So in that sense, I agree with you, Thomas, but I do think they all have their characters, flavors, and certain things, you know, maybe some of them, like the 303.
You know, I mean, people got to sell their plugins. So there is just, by the nature of it, going to be a lot of kind of marketing material that users have to sift through. And I think, you know, just hold your own ears and use what you have. And if you see something that looks good, you know, use your ears to see if it sounds, you know, if it's what you want.
Well, it's good to get a developer's perspective on that. Bendu says, I'm very interested in Dr. Vibe. It would be my first AUV3. I don't use iOS. So Bendu, if you want to get that Dr. Vibe, make sure you comment after the video. I'll just reiterate one more time because we had another question too. Little Bro asked, what are the options? Is it basically any Sketch Audio plugin? I put a link to the website in the chat. You can click it and see. And then I'll put it in the description when we're done as well. Thomas also says stock compressors for the win. I do agree with that. But okay, let's move on to the community corner because we have a new Discord challenge. After quite a lot of votes, we went through. We have a winner. The new Discord challenge is the track in 60 minutes. So the goal here is that you have one set 60 minutes. It could be done in 10-minute intervals, or it could be just 60 minutes straight, but it's the max is 60 minutes. We have to use the honor system unless you film and or live stream it. I'm planning to live stream my track. So that's the goal, is make the full thing from creation, from start, from a blank canvas to finishing the track in 60 minutes. It does not have to be a complete track. It doesn't have to be a release ready track. You don't need to stress. It's not something, this isn't to stress out about. This is to have fun, to get out of our comfort zones and to experiment. So if you want to join the challenge, comment on the server challenge channel on Discord. The Discord link is in the description. And the listening party, I gotta go. I've got off all websites on my desktop so that it would help with the stream, what little it is. But the listening party will be, I'm gonna go look. I think it's September something. Let me see. September. Oh no, I'm sorry. The listening party will be August 28th, which is the 4-year anniversary of Audionautic, at 10 a.m. Pacific. So an hour before we go live for ADSN, and it will be on the Discord. Again, that link is in the description. But yeah, it's just to have fun. Just comment if you are going to participate. It's going to be a lot of fun. I'm going to live stream my track creation. I'm just figuring out how I want to create it. Like if I'm going to go SP or SP with Logic for iPad or just all Logic. We'll see. But Eon Lake, are you going to get in on this challenge?
I want to. It's the challenge I wanted. I voted for it and everything. So
you froze there for me for a second. Do you mind restarting?
Yes, is the short answer.
There we go.
I did vote for it. It's the one I wanted. So yes, why not what's the worst that could happen?
There you go. There you go. And okay, I'm glad to see that. Let's see. We got a couple questions actually I want to run through. We can talk about this one on the Discord, which I'll get to in a minute. But Smiling Ear says, I'd like to know what properties make some compression warmer than others. If it's being applied equally, don't know how that happens. That's something we can talk about in the Discord. Maybe Ryan, if you have any say on that, you can put it in the Discord. Very interesting question, though. Stillhead also asks, Thomas, will it run on Mac OS if I buy from the App Store? It will, right? Because I just downloaded it had like the cloud thing, and it's on my Mac. So.
Yeah, it's a universal purchase. So if you buy it on your phone, you can get it for free on your Mac. But sometimes the App Store, it won't like register, and it'll show you that buy button. But I promise, if you click that buy button, it will recognize that you won't have to pay again. Like it will be like, oh, you already have this.
That's what mine did. Yeah. I had that little like cloud like to just download it. So yeah, that worked. And Smiling says mine ended up being a 3-second loop repeated for 30 seconds. Hey, whatever works. Bendu says, I am excited for the 60-minute challenge. I'm planning on a video documentation for science. Yeah, I would encourage everybody to try to film the process. One, so that we can actually show we did do an hour. We didn't go over. But two, it's, this show, we do talk about marketing, social media, and things like that. That's easy content that you could chop up into tiny segments. If you did a specific thing, like, oh, I did this sound on this plugin, that could be a 1-minute social media thing or something, or a 5-minute video on YouTube. And then you can make multiple videos out of it. So yeah, lots of potential there. And this show, the Discord server, the challenges, all of that is brought to you by our patrons. If you want to help support the show, go to patreon.com/audionautic. I don't have Curtis here to help me out by loading the pages and all that, but you get bonus content at certain tiers. You get sample packs. We just put out a sample pack that we made in Switzerland together. Not actually together, we did it separately, but we pooled our resources together and made a field recording sample pack, and Curtis then chopped it up into one-shots and made some drum sounds out of it and all that stuff. So that one is really cool. You also get a monthly additional podcast where it's really more of a hangout. That one's coming up. And you also get a channel on Discord that's for patrons only. So there's a lot of cool stuff. We nerd out on gear on the additional podcast like we do here, but even in more detail. And it's nonstop on that Discord. We do all that type of stuff. So if you do want to help us keep the lights on and keep going with all these things that we do, that is the best way to help support the show. But of course, being here week in and week out in the chat, in the comments afterwards is more than enough. But let's get into the last bit today. And we can do this a little shorter, but it's not even out yet. But Akai released the MPC3, or is releasing. They announced the MPC3 update. And this changes quite a lot. And Eon, like, you have an MPC, so I'm curious to get your take on this. Let me see if I can share the website. I'm doing all this on my own today, so give me a second. Go ahead, Eon. Like, what were you saying?
It's going into public beta soon. It's been tested by a whole bunch of people. There's a good 40-minute or so video from Akai.
Yeah, and a lot of YouTubers made videos.
It's massive in the sense of how much they've changed. It looks completely different.
So I think this is a good spot to stop it at, this picture, just to show, because you're saying there's a lot they added, right? And
so what you're saying, an enhanced main mode there. I mean, if you sample something, the first thing you see is the waveforms. You don't have to go somewhere and edit them and so on. They're bringing a lot of controls onto the main panels so that you can touch on things or long touch on them and open up the other areas. There's been a huge amount of development they've put into what they're referring to as the linear arranger. But I mean, you know, this is essentially, it's a DAW, right? You can run it on your PC. Or
Look
your
at
Mac
what Thomas
as well.
just said too. Looks like Ableton Live. I was going to mention.
It looks like a DAW, right? I mean, you know, it's a sampler. It does all these other things, but I mean, it really is like a DAW. And one of the reasons I didn't gel with it so well, and I really haven't used it much, is just I like the fact that it's portable and self-contained, you know, and you don't even need headphones necessarily if you've got the Live 2 like me. But I just didn't gel with the fact that it's another DAW. You know, I like bits of kit. I like to have a display that I can edit samples and slice and all the usual functions and so on. But I like the fact it can act as a brain in a live setup as well, and it can sequence a couple of synths, you know, along with producing, you know, some beats and whatnot. But I didn't really want to learn another DAW. I didn't like the fact that it was a DAW, and I didn't really gel with the way that it was all displayed. I like the new version, and as far as I can see, it looks completely different. I mean, it could be a different product. I like the new version a lot better. I thought one of the drawbacks as well was that the fact you couldn't stream from disk on it. That was quite a big drawback for me, because the bonus of the thing is it's got quite a lot of storage. You can put a hard disk underneath it, or at least my one does. You can have USB drives, you've got SD cards, you've got the capability to have a lot of sounds there, but you can't stream from a disk. That's just nuts, you know, because that could be really helpful, especially playing live and doing transitions and so on. So they've introduced that. They've changed absolutely everything. They've beefed up their arranger, you know, and like they're saying in the chat, it is like a DAW.
Yeah.
Even more so now. Effects, I think, are a bit more handy and easier to use. Mixing looks easier to do as well. I think it makes it a lot better if that's the sort of thing that you're looking for and want to have in your setup.
Yeah, definitely.
I've registered for it, and I'm going to install it as soon as they send me a link.
That was going to be my question. So let me just quickly run through kind of like, you did a great job explaining all the things, but so that the main mode is the new interface. So there's visual feedback, lots of colors, streamlined navigation. So the goal there, I guess, is what they claim to be intuitive user experience. And then there's this new linear arranger, which really is like the DAW look, you know, like an arrangement mode. And so that is really where you get like they do full color tracks, pad mixer. They added this new mixer that's everything's really colorful basically and like easy to navigate. It looks like they added channel strips, macro controls, the drum grid, a disk streaming, which you talked about, which is huge. Direct to pad sampling, and then the whole stems compatibility. So stems, I believe, is already now in desktop mode, because previously stems, which is the removal or separation of, if you take like a song, like an audio 2-track, which is the full song, if you throw that into a stem splitter, which we've talked about before, it splits it into 4 different stems. So you get like the melody, the drums of it, the bass, and the other or whatever. And this is now, previously that was only with desktop, the MPC stems.
But
now
you do have to have a license for it.
Yeah, I think it's 10 or 12 bucks, right?
Yeah.
It's an add-on. That's a good point. Yeah.
You have to activate the add-on on whichever platform you've got. But I mean, you know, it's to pay for it once and add it. But
the fact that it's now in standalone mode, so like you can have just the MPC, you don't need your computer. That's huge. I'd still really like to see updates to the hardware though, because I mean, a lot of the hardware has very low RAM, right? Like low RAM. I mean, these are starting to get dated in terms of their design. And the last thing they introduced recently was the MPC, I think, Key 37, which is really the MPC. What's the small one? MPC 1 or whatever. It's like just a slightly beefed up one, because I think they made a non-key beefed up version, like the MPC 1 Plus or something. So
yeah, there was a slightly updated one, but the feeling feels very much like, you know, there's got to be a next generation coming along at some point. And
they're
maybe
very
this
much
is
due.
precursor to that, you know.
Yeah, they're very much due for an update, and I think because we did a STEM shootout between Logic Pro, or I did on my channel, I think Logic Pro and the MPC, and you know, Logic Pro is it's only with the M chips. You can't use the stem splitter on the previous, you know, Intels or whatever. And yeah, so the MPC, I wonder if those stems are being held back by the now that it has to be compatible with the standalone MPC with its limitations and stuff. I wonder if it did get an upgrade, if the stem splitter would get an upgrade. Ryan, what's your thoughts on all this?
Yeah, I mean, it's very impressive. I personally have not used one of these devices, but it is amazing everything they're packing in there. It seems to me like they're maybe trying to stay competitive with the Ableton, the Push 3, right?
Yeah.
Because the Push 3 is all in one. At least there's that option, right?
Yeah, you can have a standalone version for I think 2000.
But it is kind of funny how, you know, we have this DAW-less trend, but then really what you want is to be able to make a song which like requires a DAW. So you just kind of end up putting all that functionality back in there. So
yeah.
And what to do, you know. You spend years developing computers that converge all that functionality into a tool that is so flexible and useful and powerful. It's incredible. And then you go, I want to get away from that.
Yeah.
Let's start doing really simple versions on hardware.
Yeah, because it still has that screen.
It's almost the same thing, right?
Yeah. I do kind of wonder, what the market is.
How much DAW do you want?
Yeah, it's a good question. And like we're getting into a weird stage or phase where like I get comments a lot when I do videos if I claim it's DAW-less with like the Digitact and the SP, and they're like, that's a digital audio workstation. And it's like, what is the line here? Like for me, the delineation is, you know, like getting away from the computer, getting away from something that's a multi thing. Like a computer, I could be on Logic and I could also be on YouTube at the same time, right? But on an SP, sure, the SP has a screen, but it's, you know, there's no like grid, there's no this and that. Like
it's dedicated to music.
Exactly. It's dedicated. It's a dedicated piece of machinery. And the MPC is a dedicated piece of machinery, but it has all these like DAW-like things now. So we're getting in this weird phase where like, what is a DAW? What is a DAW-less setup? You know, and like there's the purists that will say like anything that's got chips or whatever is like a DAW, or, you know, like the SP is a DAW. And okay, sure, maybe. But I mean, I think it's becoming very subjective, but it's just an interesting, them going further down this line just brings this up in my mind further. Like there's this such an interesting, like, where do we draw the line? And it's all subjective in my opinion. Who cares if it gets you creating?
Throw it where you want. Yeah, basically.
Yeah, but it's just funny to me. Yeah.
Maybe it's not a DAW if you can't have you know, Twitter up on a web browser.
Yeah. X.
Yes.
Curtis would be
X, sorry.
Would quickly correct anyone that says that. When I say Twitter, he goes X. And he'd probably say in that regard as well, you know, being Curtis. But yeah, I don't think any of these additions are bad. In fact, I think they're all great. I think it's really cool to see. But I think it just depends like what you want. Because when I want to step away from the DAW, I don't know if I'd want all that menu diving, touch screen stuff. You know, like it's so powerful now what you can do in that box. But I don't know if that's like me personally, that's not what I want when I get in that. Like I was talking, I think before you came on, Eon, like in the green room before the show, I was saying to Ryan, like I would love an MPC 2000 or 1000, you know, like one of those old school ones. But I don't know if I'd want, you know, like all of that in all that's in the new one. I'd still love an MPC Live too, but you know,
yeah. I think I'll only use it as a sketch pad anyway. You know, that's what it is to me, and another sampler. But if it's able to stream long samples straight from disk, that's going to be helpful to me. I mean, I've got the black box as well, which is, you know, does that nicely. But I think it's I think all samplers really should have it these days.
Yeah, long sample playback is huge. It's very much needed. I think it's really cool to see all of this, and I'm hoping we see an MPC update, like a hardware update soon, a legit update, you know, to a new generation or something. I think that would be really cool to see. But Eon, like, so if you get, do you get in the beta just by signing up? Is that how it works?
Apparently, yeah. They'll just at some point they'll let me know when the download link is ready.
Okay.
Whatever that means. Somebody's
whatever that means. Yeah. So when you get it,
pencil.
when you get it, you got to show us what it's like IRL in real life, like maybe a demo.
Yeah. Okay.
Maybe a demo. Yeah. Ryan, I know you've got the 303. Are you using that at all as like for creative, besides, modeling it and all of that? Do you use it at all for the creative aspect of it?
I not personally, I have to admit. I have Ableton. I use Ableton a lot, and I use on iPad, I use AUM or OM as it's sometimes referred to.
Yeah.
I really love that for setting up kind of live, synth sessions. And you can have all your sequencers and it's kind of a deconstructed DAW, with no timeline. So it's really cool for kind of live jamming.
Yeah, I keep hearing about that AUM
software. Yeah, it's a must-have on iOS.
It's kind of like it's like a mixer that lets you, but it's also like Lego for audio apps. You can stick them all together and use it as a mixer, can't you? And it's kind of build your own DAW on an iPad with all your plugins. It's pretty cool.
It's so flexible, and for MIDI especially, it's the most flexible thing I've come across, because you can the routing options are like you can go into hardware and out of hardware, and it's wild.
I got to check that out. Yeah, I keep hearing about it. I've also heard, I don't know if you've ever heard of this iOS, but Loopy Pro, I think it's called. Have you heard of that?
Yeah,
someone on a live stream was mentioning it, and I was like,
I have not personally used it, but it's very popular, I know. And the developer, blanking on his name right now, but he's a really nice guy. He runs the Audio Bus forum as well.
Oh, okay, interesting. And it looks like Thomas is very happy. He says he's an Ableton guy, but where was it? It said, "That's my man, Ryan."
Ableton, it's amazing. Yeah, I love Ableton.
Yeah. I'll hold my tongue. I'll hold my tongue for this. As your guest, I'll hold my. No, I love Ableton. In essence, in theory, I love Ableton, but I don't have it. They were really trying to pressure me to get it on the Patreon a week or two ago, because I used. So Curtis and I had never met in person, Ryan, until this month. I don't know, this month, I think. We met in Switzerland together. We have both been traveling, and we filmed a couple of videos, because he's a big Ableton guy. He does a lot of live looping and things like that. And so he showed me, we used Ableton, and we built 3 or 4 songs using the live looping. Like I think it's the arrangement viewer, whatever, the one where you do all the loops and stuff. We built songs.
I think that one's Session View.
Session, that's it. Yeah, I can never remember. I used Ableton like in 2020 for live performance, but never for making music. But yeah, we have a long history on the show about Ableton. So I don't need to bring you in on all of that. But
well, I'm Team Ableton for what it's worth.
Yeah. Anyways, any last thoughts on the MPC, Ryan? The update.
Oh, for me. Yeah, I mean, it's impressive, and I think for people that are into that workflow, this is probably a really cool update. So, yeah.
And Eon Lake, anything else?
I was really pleased to see it, to be honest. I had a quick look at the video. Everything they were showing me looks better from my point of view. It is a bit colorful for my liking. It doesn't have to be quite so colorful, but what the hell, there was there's some common sense changes, and I do like to see this in code revisions, in product revisions, where you've accepted that something isn't optimal and done something about it. And I like when new features are added in updates. We all do on this show, don't we? So that's good too. Yeah.
And I was just gonna say, go ahead, Ryan. Go ahead.
Just the fact that they're putting out such a big update is a good sign that they're invested and committed to that hardware.
Not just pushing out a platform and going, there you go, you deal with it now.
Yeah. I was just gonna say, like, not every DAW or user interface can be gray,
That's
like good old Ableton.
Well, it was gray and red before on the MPC.
There we go. Well, it's not anymore. Now it's super vibrant and colorful. Ryan, what's up with you this week? This is usually our last topic. We just talk what we're up to, what we're working on this coming week, and chat. Let us know as well
what
you're up to.
Well, I am working on updates for the plugins, based on user feedback, a couple small changes. The near big project I have is getting this VST support figured out. And, I spend a lot of time sitting and typing. That's a lot of my day, but I enjoy it. I'll probably start tinkering with some new ideas, maybe next week or the week after. I always like to have something new so I can
cooking,
try that if I get bored.
I hear you. Well, that sounds exciting though. And Eon Lake, what are you up to this week?
I am going to try and take things outdoors because I'm up at the top of the building here and it's hot.
Oh yeah.
So instead of being one of those awful people that complain about good weather, I'm just going to try and get all the groove boxes outside and spend some time out there doing music instead.
That's awesome. It's so funny. We're always like-minded. I'm planning the same. I have to film a live set, or I'm due to film a live set for a online festival, and I got sick. It postponed everything. So I'm rushing. So I'm going with the SP, and I was like, why don't I film it outside? And then I made this beat in a lesson. I was teaching a lesson on the SP, and I was showing them this drum thing, and it just, after the lesson, I turned it into a beat, and then I recorded it and then stem split it and mixed it. And I'm like, that'll be the first song, and then I'll release the song with the live set, blah, blah, blah. So I'm with you. It'll be fun to get outside. I think I'll sit by the pool or something and film. That'll be an interesting little video. I wanted to do the beach, but it's so hot, and it's just takes an hour to get there now. And I'm like, I don't want sand all over the SP. So I haven't tried that one yet.
It's not covered in your warranty, is it?
Yeah, it's probably, well, I think my warranty's probably over now. I don't know. I think I've had that SP for 2 years or something. But yeah, I was I think because I did a video where I performed the jam outside. I was like, why don't I try and do a full live set, because I think the track's going to be called Golden Hour or something. So I could film it in the Golden Hour. It could be all, all synchronicities and stuff. So that should be fun. And in terms of Audionautic, what we're up to this week, well, Curtis is gone for a little bit, but I'll be manning the fort, so to speak, with the Discord and all that. I'm sure he'll hop in when he can, but we'll put this up on the podcast. And then I think Starstream, I got to talk with Curtis if he's able to make it, but Starstream for patrons should be Sunday. And then we've got our first new radio show. The Audionautic Radio is coming back, and that will be, I believe, in 2 weeks on Sunday. And I don't have the date in front of me, but that will be coming up. So that will be a live show for all. So if you have tracks you'd like to submit, send them my way on Discord or on, I think it's audionauticsounds@gmail.com. They do not need to be new songs. We're trying to keep the songs around 5 minutes, which I know irks Eon Lake, who is the master of short 9-minute vignettes. But yeah, the goal is we want to fit as many as we can in about 45 minutes to an hour, because we have limited time on weekends and all that. We know everyone else does, but so that's why we're setting that time limit. If you got a longer song, maybe try to truncate it, do a fade in, fade out, something like that. But we want it to be a place that's beyond genre, beyond the typical Submit Hub type, this is a synthwave song. It's got to be synthwavy. It's got to be a drone, for an ambient thing. We want to embrace that kind of left of center, different vibes and things like that. So if you've got music that you want to have a radio place for, that's what it is. So Audionautic Radio, I think let me get the calendar up and I can tell you what day it is, but I think it's in 2 weeks. It should be on, I think it's on, August 11th at 11 a.m. Pacific. So it's a Sunday. So that's what we've got. Gentlemen, anything before we go? Eon Lake, anything you want to add?
No, I just want to say thanks to Ryan for joining us.
Yeah, nerding out with us.
I'm being graceful with the cross-examination that he got. Thank you.
Well, I mean, yeah, I want to say thank you to you guys for having me. Seems like you have a really cool community going on here, and I hope to come back sometime and continue participating. And I appreciate the outlet for the for this discussion we've had. So yeah, thank you guys.
Yeah, Ryan, we'd love to have you back on. I mean, anytime really, but whenever you have a new plugin or if you get a big update or something and want to show it,
I'm always happy to talk gear too.
Yeah, yeah, of course, of course. I gotta say, it's really interesting to have that developer side of it. Like when we're talking about compressors, we can like go into, you've done this research and you've created these types of things. So it's interesting to get this other angle to it that we don't typically hear from and things like that. So yeah, whenever you want to hop on again, let us know. And like I said, if you've got updates or something new, we're happy to demo it. We do live demos and things, but if you want to come on and show it, because I got to say, like hearing you talk about, I'm going to say it again, but Dr. Vibe, like the needle thing and like how that's a geometric distortion, all that, like I never would have probably even gotten that. I mean, like it's interesting to hear it from you. So, whenever you want to do that, awesome. We'd love to have you back. And yeah, chat. Sorry I wasn't able to share a ton of chats today. I'm doing all the production on my own today, so it's a little hard to get through that. But Thomas did say that I'll eventually give in and join the Ableton cult. Bro, I have no qualms with using Ableton. I always say, but it doesn't click in my brain when it comes to like writing. It just doesn't do it. And maybe the newer updates will. I haven't used it since I think 9. So yeah.
Yeah, writes the songs for you now.
Yeah.
So on desktop, what's
I use Logic and Reason. Mainly Logic, but I have some. I'm like old habits die hard. I've got some really nice presets on Reason, and since Reason works in Logic and other DAWs now as a plugin, like as a stereo or 16-channel plugin, I'll still use that sometimes because I make a lot of different genres, right? Like I have my ambient side, I have the synthwave side, I have the DAW-less like beats and stuff. So when I do like synthwave, Reason, it's those synths, I just know how to program it for that type of sound for a lot of like filter automation. Yeah, but mainly it's Logic. I write a lot in Logic and things like that. So yeah.
Yeah, and I think it's important to once you get familiar with something, learning how to do the same things in another piece of software might just be not worth the time. If you have something you know how to use, that you can get the sound you want.
On the other hand, I find I write differently depending on what I'm using. Like if I'm in Logic, I write more cinematic stuff. I'm slowly starting to get the hang of like it's no different really, but like when it comes to synthwave or something, I typically usually sequenced in Reason, and then beats and like really wonky ambient is the SP in my DAW setup. So I don't know if it's just like I like having that delineation or if it's just how my brain clicks, but
yeah. And it is an interesting point how that the technology influences how you interface with it, right?
Yeah.
And that it's a whole other discussion.
Just wait for AI to merge with us right now.
Yeah.
We don't need to go down that discussion route. Yeah. Ryan, anything else before we go?
I don't think so. Just thanks again. Yeah.
Yeah. Awesome. All right. Well, thanks for tuning in. Ryan, thanks again for coming on. It was an absolute pleasure talking with you about all this stuff. Again, 3 code giveaways. As soon as this stream ends and you can comment the first 3 comments, post what you learned from the video or anything like that. If you took anything from what Ryan was talking about, maybe the 303 compressor and how it works, but then just comment whichever. I put the link. I'll put it again in the description, but the sketch, is it just sketchaudio.com, Ryan?
Yes. And I should mention on Instagram, I'm sketchaudio_.
Yeah.
And also on X.
Yeah. Same with the underscore.
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Yeah. So follow him on both of those, and just go and comment when the video ends which of the plugins you want. My suggestion again, Dr. Vibe, but hey, whatever you want, go for it. No pressure. All right. Well, we will be back next week, Wednesday, 11 a.m. Pacific. And just thanks again for watching. Much love, and thanks to all of our patrons who help us do this and let us keep doing this. So we will see